A caveman named Spear returns home after fishing for his family, dodging predators. But when he arrives, he discovers that 3 dinosaurs are eating his mate and children. Filled with rage, he prepares to fight, but the leader of the dinosaurs appears and calls them back to the forest before they attack Spear. Devastated, Spear erases a cave painting of his family and, heartbroken, attempts to jump off a cliff. In the end, he decides to move forward, and at dawn, he sees a vision of his family in the sun, giving him the strength to live. Days later, while fishing, he sees a Tyrannosaurus filled with hatred. He thinks it is one of those who killed his family and follows it to take revenge. As he gets closer, he realizes it is a female with 2 offspring. Just then, the same dinosaurs that killed his family appear and attack the mother and her young, ignoring Spear. Not wanting to see another family destroyed, he decides to help, and together, they manage to defeat the attackers. The Tyrannosaurus young approach Spear affectionately, reminding him of his children. But suddenly, the alpha appears and devours the young in a single bite. Spear and the mother Tyrannosaurus, whom he calls Fong, fight together against the alpha and manage to kill it, avenging both families. Although Fong is devastated by the loss of her offspring, Spear later wanders alone on the beach, reflecting on what happened, until Fong approaches him, willing to follow him, as she is no one else. Spear accepts her as his new companion, and the two set off in search of new adventures. Spear chases a large boar to kill and eat it, but just as he is about to throw his spear, Fong rushes ahead and eats the animal, stealing his prey. Frustrated, Spear keeps looking for food and manages to catch another boar, but when he climbs down from the tree to eat, he finds Fong devouring his prey again. Filled with rage, Spear confronts her by yelling and pounding the ground, but Fong remains unfazed and keeps eating. Later, Spear climbs a tree for some fruit, but Fong hits the tree, knocking him to the ground along with the fruit. Before he can eat, Fong devours all the fruit, even though she is a carnivore. Spear tries to intimidate her, but ultimately gives in. That night, while they sleep by the fire, Fong's loud breathing irritates Spear, who throws stones at her to try to silence her. To distract himself, he starts making hand shadows, which remind him of his children. He realizes that a Tyrannosaurus like Fong was the one who devoured his family, and he looks at her with hatred. Fong notices this and growls back at him. The next day, Spear tries to hunt a deer, but Fong is ready to steal his prize again. Spear confronts her, and finally, the two fight for real, wounding and bleeding each other. Just as they are about to continue, they realize that a massive number of snakes have invaded the forest. Suddenly, a flood washes the snakes away and nearly takes Spear and Fong with it. The two work together to survive the water and a giant snake, earning each other's respect and trust. Fong even tends to Spear's wound after he hits his head during the flood. From then on, they learn to hunt together and share their prey as a team. A herd of mammoths advances through a snowstorm, but one of the oldest lags behind due to its age and becomes lost. When the storm calms, the elderly mammoth walks alone, trying to find its herd until Spear and Fong ambush it. Although the mammoth fights back, it is ultimately defeated, and Spear skins it, taking its hide, meat, and a single tusk. Spear and Fong find a cave to spend the night. Fong is happy with the food, but Spear remembers teaching his son to hunt and to respect animals in gratitude for their food. Meanwhile, the herd finds the body of the elderly mammoth being eaten by wolves. They drive the wolves away and gather to bid farewell to the elder. The matriarch caresses it with her trunk until she notices a tusk is missing. Filled with rage, the herd follows Spear and Fong's tracks. They soon find Spear and Fong and attack them to recover the tusk. Cornered, Spear tries to defend himself using the mammoth's tusk. Seeing how the mammoths react, he realizes they only want the tusk to pay tribute. Respectfully, Spear hands it to the matriarch, who takes it and leaves with the herd without further conflict. Later, the herd carries the tusk to a mammoth graveyard, where they place it among the bones of their ancestors and perform a ritual in its honor. Swaying and touching the tusk with their trunks, saying a final farewell to their fallen companion. Fong runs across an open field with Spear on her back while a large pack of raptors chases them. After a long chase and killing several raptors, they are surrounded. However, the raptors suddenly flee, terrified. The moon turns red, and a thick fog covers the area. As they explore, Spear and Fong see a gaunt caveman carrying a dead boar. After falling and dislocating his leg, the caveman calls to his family, who watch from a cave. Another caveman goes out to retrieve the boar, but a flying creature captures him. Spear picks up the injured caveman and the boar and takes them to the cave. However, the cavemen retreat deeper into the cave, leaving Spear and Fong confused. Suddenly, a swarm of giant red bats attacks Spear and Fong. After a fierce fight, the bats capture Spear and take him to their nest. Fong, determined to rescue him, tracks the bats and pretends to be injured so they take her to the nest. There, she finds Spear wrapped in a kind of spiderweb. It turns out that the bats share the cave with a giant prehistoric spider. Fong fights the spider while Spear frees himself from the webs. Together, they manage to kill the spider and escape before the bats return. The bats track them, enraged because they killed the spider. Spear and Fong lead them to an area of tall grass where a pack of raptors ambush the bats. While both groups fight, Spear and Fong take the opportunity to escape quickly. Spear and Fong are traveling through a jungle when they find a peaceful oasis. While Fong drinks water, Spear starts fishing. Surprisingly, the fish don't flee, and he gathers them easily. After sharing some with Fong and piling up a good amount, he makes the mistake of looking at the scenery. When he looks back, Fong has already eaten everything. He laughs, and they sit by the shore to enjoy the moment. Fong even leaves a footprint next to Spear's hand in the sand as a sign of camaraderie. Later, Spear goes into the water to swim, but notices mysterious figures approaching and kidnapping Fong. When Spear tries to search for her, he is knocked out and captured. Upon waking, Spear finds himself tied up next to Fong in an arena where a tribe of monkeys holds brutal fights. A shaman leads the ceremony and introduces Croc, a simian leader who defeats other warriors to win. Then, the shaman lowers Fong into the arena and offers Croc a black liquid that transforms him into a giant, muscular monster. Croc, now wearing a Triceratops helmet, brutally hits Fong, who cannot defend herself. Spear, seeing Fong in danger, frees himself and climbs up to where the shaman is. He knocks the shaman down and drinks the black liquid, transforming himself into a beast to face Croc in a brutal fight. Spear defeats Croc, tearing him apart. The surroundings are terrified, and he then runs to Fong, who lies motionless in the arena. Seeing that she doesn't respond, Spear kneels beside her, devastated. Spear mourns Fong's apparent death, but soon discovers that she is still alive, though gravely injured. He searches for water and scares away vultures trying to eat the remains of the apes. He returns to Fong, gives her water, and uses the rest to make mud and cover her wounds. Although Fong is uncomfortable, it seems the mud helps her heal. While tending to Fong, the vultures return in greater numbers. Spear tries to move her, but she is too heavy. He comes up with the idea of making an improvised stretcher using bamboo sticks and vines. He also crafts a new spear from a sharp stone and a stick. With great effort, he manages to place Fong on the stretcher and drag her. Later, he stops due to the blisters on his hands, and as night falls, he hears a hyena near the forest. Spear lights some campfires for protection while they rest. The hyena watches them, but doesn't attack. The next day, Spear makes a harness to drag the stretcher more easily, but notices more and more hyenas following him. He finds a small cave to spend the night, but is awakened by carnivorous insects attracted to Fong. At first, he can't kill them because they have tough, spiked shells, but he discovers they are vulnerable when flipped over. He cooks them and feeds Fong and himself. The next morning, Spear goes out to fetch water and blocks the cave entrance with stones to protect Fong from the hyenas that try to enter while he's away. Fong wakes up to the sound of the hyenas and sees Spear returning, covered in scratches. She tries to stand to help, but Spear asks her to keep resting while he faces them. Then, using the remains of the insects as knuckle dusters, he leaves the cave to fight the hyenas. Together, they roar victoriously as they see the hyenas flee. In a peaceful valley, a herd of Argentinosaurus lives in peace until one of them is bitten by a sick, rotten parasaur. The infection begins to consume its body, and soon the infected Argentinosaurus goes mad, attacking and brutally killing its own herd. Some time later, Spear and Fong cross the valley and come across the massacre. While inspecting the corpses, the infected Argentinosaurus appears and chases them. Spear and Fong flee and manage to lose it by jumping into a ravine, where the monster faints after crashing. That night, Spear has a nightmare where the monster bites him, and his body starts to decompose. Waking up scared, he decides to flee with Fong again. As they descend, they accidentally knock loose a rock that falls near the monster. They think it is still unconscious, but just as they are about to escape, the infected Argentinosaurus rises and chases them again. They enter a volcanic area with rivers of lava. The monster ends up burning its throat. Enraged, it tries to reach them but sinks into the lava, which burns it down to the bones. Spear and Fong seize the opportunity to escape, using the monster's body as a ramp to reach safety. Finally, the Argentinosaurus, trapped in the lava, burns completely and dies in an explosion of ashes. Spear and Fong watch its end with a mix of awe and horror, reflecting on its terrifying fate. Spear and Fong travel through the jungle at night, searching for a giant green flame. They arrive and see a bearded caveman hanging over the fire, screaming in pain while witches increase the flames. The witches summon their leader, who arrives riding a pterodactyl. She descends to the bonfire and transforms into a black demon with green details. A magical snake penetrates the bearded caveman's throat, draining his life force and leaving him mummified. The snake passes to the witch leader, creating a baby in her stomach, which she then hands over to the other witches. The pterodactyl spots Spear and Fong and alerts the witches, who chase them through the jungle. Fong is mentally controlled by Lula, a small witch, and Spear loses consciousness. The next morning, Spear wakes up tied over the bonfire. Lula returns riding Fong, causing Spear to scream in desperation. His scream breaks the spell for a moment, but Lula freezes time and enters the memories of Spear and Fong. Lula sees Fong's past, when she cared for her offspring and met Spear. She then explores Spear's memory, witnessing the birth of his daughter and the tragedy of her loss. Lula returns to the present and revisits her own memories, recalling her deceased daughter. Moved, she decides to help Spear. As night falls, the witch leader returns for the ritual, but Lula kills the pterodactyl and frees Spear by controlling Fong. Enraged, the witch leader transforms into a giant wolf and attacks Fong. Lula turns into a giant crow and distracts the witch, giving Spear and Fong time to escape. Finally, the witch leader defeats and kills Lula, breaking the bond with Fong. In a heavenly vision, Lula reunites with her daughter in a field of flowers. They embrace as the vision fades to white. In the middle of the night, a saber-toothed tiger roams the forest searching for prey, but is brutally attacked by an unknown creature. Spear and Fong, camping nearby, hear the attack and prepare to fight. When the danger does not appear, they let down their guard. The next morning, Spear and Fong find the mangled corpse of the saber-tooth. Fong becomes so agitated that she runs into the forest briefly and roars at the corpse while Spear examines the body, confused. They continue on their way, but at nightfall, the creature reappears and attacks a herd of ceratops, massacring several of them. Spear wants to intervene, but Fong blocks his path, prompting Spear to decide against it while the cries of the ceratops fill the air. The next day, after the night's events, Spear and Fong are nervous while hunting. Hearing the crows, Spear climbs a tree and sees the remains of the previous night's massacre. They move away, but a windstorm frightens them. Discovering it was just a branch, they continue their path and camp again, trying to rest. During the night, a gust of wind extinguishes their fire, and the creature's call wakes them up. On high alert, They hear something in the bushes and flee to a low area filled with fog. The creature catches up to them and almost injures them, slicing a tree during the chase. Fong tries to ambush it, but the creature escapes, leaving foul-smelling black sludge on Fong's face. The creature corners them, and Spear, in a desperate attempt, strikes a rock, producing a spark that frightens the monster, which fears fire. Realizing the creature's weakness, Spear lights the tip of his spear, and along with Fong, pursues the creature that night, setting trees on fire along the way to trap it. Spear throws his flaming spear, igniting the monster and revealing its form, a massive theropod with long claws. Spear and Fong watch as it burns, ending its reign of terror in the forest. Spear and Fong are fishing in a lagoon when a human woman, who appears to be a slave, emerges from the water pursued by a pliosaur. Spear and Fong fight the creature and kill it, but the woman escapes into the forest. Spear chases her and, after a tense encounter, lowers his weapon and makes a fire for her to warm up. That night, as he watches her pray to the moon, Spear observes in silence. The next morning, the trio begins a journey through volcanoes, grasslands, jungles, and mountains. When they stop to eat, the woman rejects the raw meat Spear offers and instead makes an improvised stew with plants, which immediately attracts Fong, who devours one of the vegetables. Spear, on the other hand, does not appreciate the stew. That night, the woman prays to the moon again. The following morning, Spear notices that the woman's wooden collar bothers her, so he uses Fong's bite to break it and then removes her wrist shackles with a rock. Grateful, the woman tells him her name, Mira. As they continue, Mira uses materials from the environment to create a bow and hunts a dinosaur that Spear and Fong couldn't catch. While eating, Mira draws her story in the dirt. Her people were enslaved by invaders with a scorpion symbol, and she was the only one who escaped. Spear seems to understand part of the story and becomes uneasy upon seeing the scorpion symbol. They cross a deep river using Fong as transport and arrive at a cave where Mira climbs rocks, using food as an incentive for Fong. That night, Spear sees her praying to the moon again, sparking his curiosity, but she only gives a brief explanation in her language before sleeping. At dawn, Spear and Fong are ambushed by a tribe of monkeys who have captured Mira. Spear and Fong fight fiercely using Mira's bow, his spear, and the monkeys' weapons to repel the attack, but they fail to rescue her. Following her screams through the forest, they find several monkey bodies pierced by arrows. Upon reaching the coast, they see it is too late. Mira has been taken on a ship with a scorpion symbol on its sail. As the ship fades into the horizon, Spear speaks his first word, while Fong roars in sorrow. Determined to rescue her, Spear tries to swim after the boat, but cannot advance and ends up back on the shore. Undeterred, Spear cuts down several trees and builds a makeshift raft. The next morning, the raft is ready, but Fong refuses to get on until Spear lures her with some large insects. They sail using the waves, but when the raft stops, Spear pushes it until he is exhausted. Fong then uses her tail to push them forward until she too gets tired. During the night, they rest under a starry sky and watch bioluminescent jellyfish and whales swimming beneath a lunar eclipse. At dawn, they have no food and search the ocean unsuccessfully. Later, Spear dives into the water after a shadow, discovering it's a giant sea turtle. He attempts to suffocate it unsuccessfully until he brings it to the surface, and Fong delivers a lethal bite to its neck. They eat from the turtle and use its shell and bones to create a shelter. While trying to catch flying fish, a storm approaches and they are attacked by a pterodactyl and a giant shark that destroys the raft. Spear ends up in the shark's mouth, but frees himself by stabbing it with a piece of the raft. The giant waves from the storm hit them violently, and Spear uses the remains of the raft to attack the shark, driving a piece of wood into its eye. However, his victory is short-lived, as the waves separate them. Fong ends up on an unknown beach, unconscious and alone. When she wakes up, she frantically searches for Spear, but can't find him. Frustrated and desperate, she roars in solitude. Since arriving on the new beach, Fong waits for Spear to appear. A sound from the forest catches her attention, and she goes to investigate. Along the way, she mistakes a moss-covered branch for Spear. She then sees another dinosaur-like figure and follows the trail, but only finds fresh tracks and encounters a red T-Rex, who runs away. Fong follows it, but can't catch up. Meanwhile, Spear has also arrived on the same island, but at a different beach. A group of humanoid figures finds him and takes him inland. Meanwhile, Fong and the red T-Rex compete to hunt an Arsinoetherium. Though they both manage to catch it, Red gives up and releases the prey. Fong throws a piece of meat to him, and they share the meal. Spear wakes up covered in mud in a strange hut decorated with animal remains and eyes. As he moves, he feels intense pain in his right arm, broken during the fight with the shark. A woman with a single eye scares him, and Spear accidentally sets the place on fire by knocking over some bottles. He escapes, but a horde of Celtic warriors chases him. Although he manages to defeat them, the Celtic leader intervenes, offering him food and water to prove he is not a threat. Meanwhile, Fong and Red find a fruit tree and get drunk from eating too many fermented fruits. In the Celtic village, the healer treats Spear's wounds, resetting his arm and applying a mix of hot reeds and ointments that leave him asleep with a pink powder. The next day, Red guides Fong through a mist and wooden stakes to the Celtic village. Red begins attacking the villagers, and Fong follows, until Spear emerges from a house and sees her with legs hanging from her mouth. Red attempts to charge at Spear, but Fong intervenes. Spear stops the villagers from attacking, unaware that Fong and Red have already become friends. Spear climbs on her back, only for her to throw him off and save him from Red's attack. What follows is a tense battle between the three, where the villagers side with Spear to face Red. The battle destroys several houses, including the healers, which explodes and sends Spear and Red into a final confrontation. Spear sustains several serious injuries and nearly dies at Red's hands, but Fong saves him at the last moment. She defeats Red with a powerful kick, impaling him on stakes. Almost sadly, Fong comforts him as Red bleeds out. Spear, wounded, watches and feels sorrow for the whole situation. In the end, the Celtic chief tries to talk to Spear, but he and a depressed Fong walk back into the forest. Spear and Fong seek shelter from a storm under a tree. Still affected by the previous events, they walk through the forest and find a cave to protect themselves from the rain. Spear lights a fire and discovers the cave is deeper than it seemed. When he lights a torch, he finds paintings on the walls showing humanoid figures, dinosaurs, and mammals. After studying them and comparing his hand to the marks on the wall, he returns to the fire to sleep. The next morning, Spear takes a peaceful walk and reaches a plain, where he imagines events from the paintings, like a human raising his hand towards him. He finds the ruins of an abandoned village and imagines what life might have been like there. He tries to cheer up Fong by bringing her a deer, but she doesn't react. That night, Spear goes outside to see the moon and remembers how Mira used to pray to it. He tries to imitate her gestures, although he doesn't understand their purpose. He gets distracted when an owl watches him and scares him away. Later, he and Fong wake up to the sound of a bear carrying a Viking with an axe. The cave collapses due to the fight, and they must leave. Outside, they find a second Viking riding another bear, but armed with a sword. Spear and Fong defeat both bears and the second Viking. Upon seeing the first Viking's shield with a red scorpion symbol, Spear shouts Myra's name, causing the warrior to drop his axe and shield and flee. Spear chases him, injures him with his spear, and demands to know where Mira is. The Viking tries to fight, but Fong rips him in half. Spear takes the Viking's sword as his new weapon and finds bear tracks, giving them a clue to look for Mira. The two cross the field, moving quickly during the day, until they reach a high point where they see a Viking village. Spear leaves Fong behind to maintain the element of surprise and sneaks into the village, finding the cabin where Mira and other captives are held. Spear and Mira reunite and free the slaves. As they leave the village, they hear roars in the mist. Spear, knowing the threat that approaches, prepares to fight. Spear is ready to face the bear riders emerging from the mist. Seeing the sword Spear holds, The Viking leader recognizes it as belonging to one of his fallen warriors and orders his men to advance slowly towards him. But the bears sense an even more dangerous threat: Fong. After defeating the leader, Fong begins a brutal fight. Mira and the other slaves take advantage of the chaos to escape the village. With the noise of the fight, more Vikings wake up and ring a bell to call for reinforcements. Rika, a Viking warrior, emerges from her house with her child to lead the attack, while Spear unleashes a massacre, tearing apart Vikings one by one. From a rooftop, Mira sees an exit leading to the forest and guides the slaves in that direction. Armed with a spear along the way, the Vikings manage to surround Spear in a shield formation. Even the children of the village participate in the fight. Rika's son shoots arrows at Spear from the roof in his first violent act. Mira knocks down a bear and decapitates its rider with an axe. The battle intensifies as more Vikings and archers join in. Spear breaks the formation and throws a Viking against Rika's son, who falls to the ground. Rika enters the fight by throwing an axe that wounds Fong in the leg and then stabs her in the snout. But Fong responds by grabbing her and killing her. Rika's son attempts to attack Spear, but Spear accidentally throws him against a rock, killing him. Affected by what happened, Spear reunites with Fong as a thick red mist covers the village, allowing them to escape. However, they come across a cliff and are exposed while the Vikings bombard them with arrows. Cornered, Spear and Fong counterattack, using the mist to surprise their enemies and finish them off. When all the Vikings have fallen, they join Mira at the docks and escape on one of the ships. Later, another ship arrives at the village, bringing the Viking chief and his eldest son, Eldar. Surprised by the silence, they follow a trail of blood and discover the disaster that Spear and Fong left behind. Upon finding the body of his wife, Rika, and his younger son, the chief and Eldar are devastated as the village burns. The chief and Eldar gather the bodies of the dead and then take their families' bodies to the ship. Eldar frees the slaves to make room. When the ship is placed in the water, the chief tries to set it on fire with an arrow, but the pain stops him. Eldar takes the bow and completes the ritual, letting the burning ship drift into the sea. With their duty fulfilled, the chief and Eldar arm themselves with heavy armor and set off for revenge. Before continuing with the main story, we travel to the year 1980 in England. A scientist named Blakely arrives at a mansion where other scientists, Charles, Judd, Bertie, and the owner, Lord Darlington, are waiting for him. Charles gives a lecture about evolution and how modern humans still retain primitive instincts. Although the others mock him, the meeting is interrupted when a policeman warns about an inmate who has escaped from a nearby asylum. Lord Darlington opposes Charles's theory, arguing that modern humans cannot revert to a primitive state, as that would be pure madness. Suddenly, they hear loud noises from upstairs. Although the butler, Stevens, checks, they soon find his corpse being devoured by the fugitive, who then attacks them. In the fight, Judd and Bertie die. Darlington, Charles, and Blakely flee and barricade themselves. When they try to shoot the fugitive, they discover that he is agile and manages to wound Blakely. Darlington and Charles, armed, pursue him, but the fugitive ambushes them from the ceiling. Without weapons, Darlington decides to fight him with his fists, showing his skills as the Oxford boxing champion. Charles distracts him with a sword and shield, while Darlington chases him to the greenhouse, where they have a fierce confrontation. During the fight, the fugitive bites Charles's shoulder and nearly drowns Darlington. But a storm knocks a tree onto the greenhouse, allowing Darlington to use an improvised spear. Unleashing all his fury, he stabs the fugitive several times, killing him with a blow to the head, just as Spear defeated Alpha Rex. Charles, excited, states that his theory was correct, while Darlington just watches silently, contemplating the events of that night. Back in prehistory, Spear wakes up aboard the ship they stole from the Viking village. Spear notices that their wounds have been treated, and Mira is doing the same for Fong. The calm is broken when the Viking chief and his son attack them for revenge. Spear faces the chief while Mira protects Fong from Eldar's arrows. The fight is intense, but Spear manages to remove the chief's helmet, and Fong defeats Eldar. The two ships crash against the rocks, breaking Spear's ship and forcing Mira to maneuver the ship to the shore. During the chaos, Fong throws Eldar into the river, and the chief leaps after him to save him. Once on land, Fong behaves strangely and runs through the forest until she finds a suitable place to make a nest. Spear, initially confused, remembers her reaction after Red's death and realizes that Fong is about to lay eggs. He gets excited, but their rest is interrupted by a vulture, which gives him the idea to use the bird's nests. Later, Fong lays 3 blue eggs, and Spear congratulates her, though she pushes him away when he tries to touch one. High on a cliff, the Viking chief and Eldar manage to tame some vultures and fly to search for their enemies. Back at the nest, Spear catches fish for Fong while Mira repairs the ship. Peace is interrupted with the arrival of the Vikings riding vultures. Spear and Fong protect the eggs while Mira shoots with the bow. Eldar manages to capture Mira, but she hangs from a talon and climbs onto the vulture. Spear also faces the chief in the air. After a brief but intense fight, Spear throws the chief off the vulture, who survives the fall. Then, Spear throws H to the ground, where he dies upon impact. Devastated, the Viking chief sees his son's body and lets himself be carried by the river's current, disappearing with his defeated enemies. Mira and Spear return to Fong's nest and embrace her. The Viking chief crawls to the shore after being dragged by the river. As he dies, 3 celestial women descend to take him away, but from his blood pool, red arms emerge and drag him into a sort of underworld of lava. There, he sees demons throwing the bodies of Viking warriors into the magma. Horrified, he sees a door and climbs the stairs toward it, where he encounters a giant, horned creature sitting on a throne. The creature shows him a vision of Spear and Fong, offering him the chance for revenge. The chief agrees and transforms into a dark, flaming entity. While resting on the boat, Spear tries to move Fong's eggs to keep them safe on the vessel, but Fong stops him. Eventually, Mira helps him lure Fong, and together they build a new nest on the boat. Fong finally agrees and carries her eggs to the boat, preparing to set sail. During the night, they all sleep under a shooting star. The next morning, Spear is fishing when he notices a large ship approaching through the fog. 3 small ships surround their vessel and attack, releasing Egyptian warriors. Spear and Mira fight back, but they are overpowered by an Egyptian giant named Cow. In an attempt to protect her eggs, Fong accidentally drops one, which breaks, killing the baby dinosaur inside. The group is devastated, and Fong charges at Cow. However, the fight is interrupted when the Egyptian queen appears, holding the 2 surviving eggs, and orders them to be captured. The trio is taken prisoner. Spear and Mira are chained, while Fong is immobilized on a platform with wheels. They are brought aboard a massive Egyptian ship, the Colosseus, which resembles a floating city. Mira is separated from Spear and Fong, who are placed in adjacent cells, trying to comfort Fong over the loss of her egg. Cow, also imprisoned, seems to feel remorse for the accidental death of the egg. In another cell, Mira watches in despair as Spear and Fong try to rest. Later, Fong wakes up and defends herself when they try to put shackles on her, but she stops when the queen threatens to break one of the eggs. Reluctantly, she follows the queen's orders. Soon, Fong and Spear are taken in small boats along with Cow and Egyptian soldiers, with orders to fight in the invasion of a Babylonian kingdom. During the battle, Cow takes down an elephant while Spear and Fong do the same. Spear climbs the wall and fights several soldiers, while Fong helps break down the door with a battering ram. In the end, Spear and Fong roar in victory as they breach the fort's walls. The Viking chief emerges from the earth in a forest, now transformed into a black humanoid figure made of living fire. He can create fire weapons and walk on water without being extinguished. With his new powers, he embarks on a journey down the river, leaving the forest behind. Meanwhile, in Babylon, the Egyptian queen and her soldiers sack the city. Gold, weapons, and the captured leopard cub of the king, which the queen adopts. Before leaving, she orders the king's execution. Cao, wounded and covered in arrows, shares a brief moment with his daughter, who is held captive to ensure his obedience. Spear, also injured, notices Cao's situation and feels empathy, while Fong still harbors resentment toward the queen for stealing her eggs. Soon, Spear, Fong, and Cao are forced to fight in more battles, conquering cities in Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Mediterranean. After each fight, they return to the Colosseum, filled with wounds, recovering in a communal bath that sometimes ends up full of blood. After a battle, the Colosseum is attacked by a Philistine fleet, but the enemies are defeated thanks to Fong, Spear, Cao, and the Egyptians' ballistae. One night, Spear hears music in the queen's throne room. Mira, dressed as a dancer, is brought before the queen, who orders her to dance. At first, Mira refuses, but the queen shows her how to dance provocatively and then pushes the Philistine king off a balcony, killing him. Mira finally relents and dances, making the queen smile. The Colosseum arrives at a peaceful city on the Indian subcontinent. The inhabitants offer food as tribute to the queen, but she is unimpressed and orders Cao to execute them. Instead, he takes the food to the ship. Annoyed, the queen grabs her daughter as a warning and forces him to comply with her order, leaving him devastated. Spear watches Cao shed a tear over his actions. That night, a soldier brings raw meat for the prisoners, but Spear knocks him out and steals his keys, freeing Cao. Although he is too downcast to move, Spear climbs up to the throne room and sees Mira dancing for the queen, who is Fong's eggs and Cao's daughter. Alongside her, a dancer alerts the guards, and a fight begins in which Spear faces several soldiers and the queen's now-grown leopard. The queen proves to be a skilled fighter and confronts Spear in hand-to-hand combat. In the chaos, Mira takes the opportunity to grab the eggs and Cao's daughter and escape. The fight moves to the deck, where the eggs begin to break and the dinosaurs are born. Fong hears her offspring and, in a burst of maternal concern, breaks out of her cell and climbs to the deck. Spear and Mira try to protect the babies but are surrounded by guards. The queen retrieves the dinosaurs, and a soldier captures Cao's daughter just as he arrives on the scene and sees his daughter and the dinosaurs as hostages. While the queen smiles with satisfaction, she forces Cao to execute the prisoners in front of her army and Fong's young. As he raises his axe, Cao remembers how he first met the queen. He and his people were peaceful giants dedicated to farming until they were attacked and captured by soldiers. Kamau fought to protect his daughter, but in the end, he surrendered when the queen threatened the child. Determined to free his daughter and his people, Cao uses the axe to break Fong's chains instead of executing her. He then throws the axe at the queen, who barely dodges it, dropping the chains from the baby dinosaurs. Fong briefly reunites with her babies, but one is wounded by a spear, causing her to roar in pain. Spear breaks free from his chains using the stone he is tied to, swinging it to knock down his attackers. Mira helps him, and Kamau rescues his daughter from the queen, carrying her on his back. Seeing her prisoners rebel, the queen decides to use the ship's giant crossbow to attack Fong. Cao runs to the ship's hold, where he discovers that the rest of his people have been enslaved to row the Colosseum. Spear faces the queen in a fierce battle, while Mira and Fong deal with the archers. One of Fong's babies is injured, causing her to cry in pain. Mira and Spear, seeing the danger, take the babies and escape by jumping into the water, narrowly avoiding the ship's oars. In the hold, Cao faces several guards and frees the slaves, who rise up upon seeing his example. From the water, Spear, Fong, Mira, and the babies watch as the giants revolt. Spear boards another ship to free more prisoners. The queen gathers her soldiers to face the giants, but they are quickly overwhelmed. The queen tries to fight Cao, but he disarms her. Although she throws a spear that barely wounds him, he throws her overboard, ending her reign. As Spear, Fong, and the others rest on their ship, the queen crashes into them in a fatal fall. Cao, with his daughter, smiles from his ship. Finally, the group continues their journey, but unbeknownst to them, the Viking chief is still pursuing them. eager for revenge. Spear remembers his childhood. We see him making cave paintings with his father, the leader of his Neanderthal tribe. Suddenly, a saber-toothed tiger pack attacks the cave, and his father leaps into action to defend the tribe. After killing several tigers, he is defeated and killed, leaving Spear to finish off the remaining ones. After defeating them, the tribe elects him as leader and places his father's necklace around his neck. Spear wakes up with Mira, who points to a nearby land. Upon disembarking, Mira begins to cry, and Spear comforts her. A flashback shows that Myra's husband was killed by Vikings before she was captured. She eventually escaped and ended up meeting Spear and Fong. The group ventures into the Indi Plateau and spends the night in a cave. Spear joins Mira in her nightly moon worship ritual. The next morning, Fong explores and finds Amara bathing, one of Myra's closest friends. Mira and Spear arrive to investigate, and Mira joyfully reunites with Amara. The group follows the woman to her village. At first, the villagers are afraid of Spear and Fong, but Mira calms them and manages to have them accepted. That night, Spear watches a cultural dance around the fire, but feels overwhelmed and out of place, so he steps away. Mira follows him and shows him her new home in the village. Spear, Fong, and their babies settle in, although Spear remains depressed. That night, Spear paints his life on the walls of the house, even using his blood for some drawings. The next day, Mira sees the mural where Spear painted her and Fong happy with their families, while he appears alone. Eventually, the Viking chief finds the village and attacks with his fire powers. Spear and Fong try to face him, but they are cornered on the mountain and engulfed in flames. Fong manages to extinguish herself, but Spear, gravely wounded, attacks the chief, dragging him down the mountain in a final effort. However, the chief survives and declares his victory before being dragged back into the underworld. Mira finds Spear, but he is on the verge of death. She takes him to her house, and the shaman tries to help him, but soon realizes that Spear is dying and retreats. Fong and her babies roar in pain and leave the hut, leaving Mira alone with Spear. Mira understands that Spear had always sought a family and a sense of belonging. Moved and wanting to preserve his legacy, Mira joins with him intimately. Finally, Spear dies. Years later, Fong and her babies, now adults, live in Myra's village. Spear and Myra's daughter, a teenager riding one of Fong's offspring, shares a look with her mother before letting out a powerful scream with her mouth.